And what a holiday week treat this is, hanging out with our guy Tampa Bay Trevor Sikkema from PFF. And Trevor, this is the last time that we hung out. We talked briefly post-draft. I was going back through the calendar, and in the best possible way, things have been relatively status quo, kind of slow, kind of building blocky, for lack of a better term, for your Las Vegas Raiders. A good thing in the grand scheme of things, right?
No, it is, right? I mean, like, this is the time of year when you don't want to be making that many headlines, right? Because normally if you are, it's probably for negative reasons. But yeah, I mean, like, this team, I think just over the course of the offseason, I should say, going back to when, major changes were made for them, you come in and you have a draft class that you're really happy with. And I think that this was always going to be a building block season for the Raiders. So they weren't going to be this team that was going to make massive headlines or anything like that. But it just feels like the moves that they have made, okay, it is put them in the right direction. So honestly, like, for them to not be making any like sort of crazy headlines over the last like couple of months, I think the status quo is a good thing. That's where you want to be. It means that the team was set in place the right way. It means that you're not panicking one way or another, like going out like, oh, we got to get this player, we got to do something here. I think that they're on the right track.
Yeah, and I think for us, right, like the boring, for lack of a better term, is nice, right? It means you're kind of building it the right way. It seems like with Tom Telesco and AP that there is a natural progression. There is a plan. They are executing the plan. And so for us, as we sit here in early July, kind of taking stock of everything that's happened the past couple of months, we feel pretty good. And one thing that we've, I think, reflected on in a pretty nice way over the past couple of months, especially since the players got out of here, is kind of looking at this coaching staff as a whole. And look, Antonio Pierce deserves all the credit in the world. He deserves all the spotlight, the headlines, whatever you're going to get out of him. 100%, right? He did an incredible job with the Silver and Black a year ago. But we look now at we talk about the process, what AP is building on the coaching side of things. And the word that we keep coming back to is experience, right? And AP has been incredibly open, very candid, transparent about where he needs to get better, where he needs to improve. And what helps you do that is you bring a lot of guys in who know what they're doing. You're looking at the Rob Ryans of the world, Marvin Lewis, Joe Philbin, a lot of these position coaches that have been other places, that have done it at a high level. How important is it going to be for AP in 2024 to have the voices of a Marvin Lewis, a Joe Philbin, and a Rob Ryan as we go forward?
No, I think that's a big deal for him because, I'm happy that AP is getting a chance as a head coach, because I really do feel as though, there are so many times when it feels bad to say like a retread head coach, but like whoever it is, just like wasn't doing well, gets fired in the middle of the season. A guy takes over, does really well with what he's been given, and then isn't really getting considered at the end of the year. It feels like, every time that we get to that point, there's so many teams that just go like, yeah, wow, thanks for your service and what you've done over the last, couple of months to stabilize things, but we're going to look somewhere else. We're going to look for like a head coach that's got experience or is a bigger name. And I get it. The NFL, it's all about like building brands. You're trying to sell tickets. You're trying to get people excited. But man, when I think of those interim coaches and what they do when they get those jobs in, less than ideal circumstances, that doesn't get nearly as much weight to me as it should. And I feel like, AP's case, when he comes into being the full-time head coach, man, you've got to be able to point back to this locker room was not good. It felt like it was just not in a good place. The team was not going in the right direction. The vibes were not good, if you will. And it felt like when he took over, he was able to change a lot of those things. And so now that he does get that head coach tag to him, you want to surround yourself with tons of experience, like you mentioned, whether it's head coaching experience with guys who are on your staff or even just really well-seasoned coordinators, guys who have been in the NFL a long time, because they're going to be able to tell you things that you haven't seen yet, right? That's what wisdom is all about. And so for him, loving the fact that he's getting this opportunity as a head coach, but at the same time, I'm also loving the fact that he does have a lot of experience on his staff, because that's going to hopefully, be able to remedy maybe some of those first-time, full-time head coaching mistakes that I think anybody would make, but maybe some of these guys can see it before it happens. So you set them on a different path. You don't have to make those mistakes to necessarily learn from them. And I think that he's in a good spot with the guys that he's brought on.
And the best thing that AP has done, and this is just Eddie, the observer speaking, is that he gave an identity to this team, right? Like we talked on November 1st, right, where I said, listen, and this is before any games were won, any games were lost, quarterback changed, this, that, and the other. I said, I will consider this a success, AP's interim tenure, is if he does two things. One, he comes in, he steadies the ship, bring morale up, right? Like to your point, like it was not a healthy, locker room. Get the guys going in the right direction. And two, This isn't very analytical for the PFF guy. Make us cool again. Make the Raiders cool again. And that's exactly what he did. This team has an identity. This team knows what it wants to be about. And we saw it over the last part of the year and throughout the offseason program this year that the Raiders are going to be the team that we saw at the end of the season. All that's to say, they are going to have a great defense, an incredible defense, a retooled, revamped, hopefully even better than 2023 defense. And I think key to that is going to be the addition of Christian Wilkins. So I'm curious from your perspective, right? For us just talking and saying, oh, of course he's going to be great with Max. What does Christian do for Max in a very tangible way in 2024?
Well, I think he's coming off his best season, right? And not just as a complimentary piece, but also as an individual piece, right? Certainly, I think a lot of people and a lot of the headlines are like, wow, great. Look what this is going to do for Max, like you mentioned. But I think Christian Wilkins is in his own element as well when it comes to making a difference individually. He was a better pass rusher. He's a good run defender. Like all of those things, I think, bring individual value. It's not just the fact that he's going to be a really good running mate standing next to Max Crosby. He's not just there to take pressure off of Crosby, although that is something that will happen by proxy. I think it's also going to, okay, how can we get one-on-ones for Christian, right? How can we do that? And I think that anytime you have that sort of success, obviously Malcolm Kuntz had a really good season last year as well, rushing the passer. You're hoping that Tyree Wilson takes that next step. Adding a guy like Christian Wilkins only helps that, not just because of his name and his presence, but also how he affects the game individually. And going back to kind of what you were saying, I think they're approaching this the right way because you're right. It's sort of a transitional period for the Raiders, right? You know, you took a swing with Josh McDaniel as head coach. When they had Derek Carr, you know, they go out and they get Devontae Adams, and it was like that was kind of their swing of the bat. That was kind of their pushing those chips in on that hand that they were dealt, if you will. It did not go to plan, and now you sort of have, you know, another shot at it. Okay, deal the cards again. What have we been dealt, and how can we do the best with it? And to me, I think they're doing a really good job of saying, let's lean into, not that they're not trying on the offensive side of the ball. They obviously are. They still have Devontae Adams. They drafted Brock Bowers. Like they've got Jackson Powers-Johnson. Like they've got guys that you believe in on the offensive side of the ball. But defense feels like the strength of this team, like you mentioned. And so pouring some free agent resources into it, and almost like you said, having that defensive identity. Antonio Pierce, obviously, that part of his background of him as a player and him as a coach, like that fiery ability to relate to the defense and inspire the defense. Like, I think in this next era of Raiders football, sure, you want to figure out the offensive side of things, but like, it's going to be built defense first. And I think they did a really good job of identifying that and taking that next step here this offseason. So I like the additions that they made. I love how they're leaning into it because that to me is how you're going to get to whatever the next successful era is, especially if it's going to be with AP at head coach, building that through the defensive side of things. So Christian Wilkins, just a big part of that, but I like the direction they're going and that they're prioritizing that side of the ball to try to be competitive in the short term.
Yeah, I've been joking with my buddies, man, where it's like, I cannot wait, and I don't mean this, you know, sarcastically, I cannot wait to see a full season of us playing like 1984 style football, right? Like we're going to win games 13-10. It's going to be nasty and gritty. And it's exactly how AP wants it to look and feel, which I think, again, speaking to him coming in and setting that identity, having a clear understanding of this is what we're going to be about every single day from the offseason program all the way through the end of the year. This is what we're going to be about. But, you know, you brought up Tyree Wilson earlier, and he's a guy, and I'd love your 2 cents on it, because as we get closer to training camp, which now is in, about 3 weeks, which is crazy, one of the big things that all of us here are excited to see is whether he kind of continues, we look at him as a true edge rusher, or if Patrick Graham keeps him kind of on the inside. And Patrick Graham kicked him to the inside about midway through the season last year and had some really nice results. And there was obviously a method to Patrick Graham's madness there. But again, something that remains to be seen as we go through camp. But just kind of your gut indication, do you like seeing Tyree there working on the inside next to a Christian Wilkins, or do you want to see him on the outside coming off the edge?
Well, it makes sense that his more immediate success would be on the interior, because when I was scouting him when he was coming out of his draft class, a lot of people were very enamored with, you know, the size and the athleticism combo from him. And I was as well. It presents a high ceiling for a player. But in his current state, when he was coming out of Texas Tech, there were too many times where he was just winning off of being either a better athlete or that unique athleticism. There was not enough technical winning one-on-one for him when we were watching him at Texas Tech. And I remember talking about this throughout the draft process. If you expect him to come in and be anywhere near an 8 to 12 sack, double-digit sack type of a guy. I did not think that was in the cards for him. I always felt like it was going to be a couple seasons for him to be that edge rusher that really breaks out, if that was going to be in the cards for him. So for them to move him inside, I'll tell you what it is. It's a really good ability to identify where they're going to get a player in his current strengths the most return on investment. So, when I think of Tyree Wilson and kind of that mismatch about him, I think about Gregory Rousseau, who is now one of, if maybe not the best defensive lineman that the Buffalo Bills have. And I think about him when he was at the University of Miami as well. This is somebody who, much like Tyree Wilson, is just very gifted physically. It just presents a really tough matchup with how big he is, how fast he is, and how long his arms are. There were times when the Miami Hurricanes would line him up at 5 technique as a defensive end, sometimes 3 technique as a defensive tackle, sometimes as a nose tackle, because that arm length gave centers so much fits. And I feel like he hasn't been quite that versatile in the NFL, but Buffalo will move him all around the defensive line, and he gets to showcase a lot of different skill sets and abilities and some unique matchups doing so. So for Tyree Wilson, it makes sense that they would sort of follow that blueprint, especially early on. You see what he's like in the offseason. Is he picking up the pass rush moves? Is he really understanding how to have a pass rush plan, how to win the rep before the ball is even snapped, if you will? That's going to kind of be the telltale sign of, do we want this guy more as a full-time edge rusher, or do we just want to keep rotating him inside and out to be that versatile piece for us? Because with a guy like Wilson, I mean, you could set up in an even front with him as a 3 technique defensive tackle. You could set up in an odd front and have him be the defensive end because of his length. There's a lot of things that you could do with him, but I just want people to realize, like, you don't have to panic about him. I didn't think that he was going to hit the ground running. I thought it was going to be a little bit of a work in progress for him to be that pass rusher, if that was going to be obviously like in his story and his destiny. But this was always sort of what they were going to want from him. And I'm just glad that the coaching staff isn't just saying, nope, this is what we drafted you to be. You're eventually going to become this. We're pigeonholing you into this one role. And instead they're saying, look, he might not be the full-time difference-making, high pass rush win percentage edge rusher that we want him to be yet. In the meantime, let's get a really uniquely talented player on the field by using him in a lot of varying different ways. So that's kind of what I think about when I think about Tyree Wilson and what he can be.
We look at the defense and not a ton of questions, right? I think it's fun to kind of get in the weeds of, where's Tyree going to line up? Who's going to be your third cornerback? Who's going to be your fourth cornerback? Like all those types of questions. We shift to the offensive side of the football. There is a big question, right? Who is going to be the man under center when we do this thing for real week 1? Aiden O'Connell, the incumbent, right? He did a really nice job towards the end of last year when he was put in there. And you bring the guard dog in, Gardner Minshew, now residing in Las Vegas. So much to discuss, so much to see between now and week 1. The preseason obviously going to be very, very key in kind of figuring out who's going to be the starting quarterback. But as we go through camp here, Trevor, like if you're the coaching staff, both of these guys are going to get a ton of run, obviously, I would assume during the preseason, but obviously during camp. What do you want to see from those guys day in, day out, trying to figure out who is ultimately going to be QB1 on that depth chart?
Yeah, for Gardner Minshew, I think that, I'm going to say a lot of the obvious, but I think it's the obvious for a reason. He's the veteran. He started games before. To me, he's got the higher floor. If you want to make sure that the floor is not falling out from underneath you, you're probably going to stick with Gardner Minshew. But for him, it's just got to be about, okay, can he push the ball further down the field? Can he be a better game manager? Can he keep those turnover-worthy plays a little bit lower? Like that, to me, Gardner Minshew, everybody obviously loves, the personality, but sometimes the personality comes out in the style of quarterback play, which is both good and bad, right? He'll give you those crazy plays that you absolutely love, but he'll also give you those crazy plays that can be backbreakers for you. And sometimes you've got to be able to manage that a little bit better. Like I look at Baker Mayfield, right? Mayfield's sort of the same, I would say, archetype of quarterback. He's had more success than Gardner Minshew has with that archetype, but Baker's kind of known as a little bit of a gunslinger, like a loose cannon type of a player. And through the first half of the season last year with Tampa Bay, it was a lot of big time throws, but it was a lot of turnover worthy plays as well. Second half of the season, he was really able to hone in on the good and eliminate some of the bad. That's what you got to look at with Gardner Minshew. And then for Aiden O'Connell, to me, I really liked what I saw from him at Purdue, especially that first year with him as a starter. It wasn't as electric in his second season there, but I feel like he has a high potential. I'm really glad that he is getting a legitimate shot to be the starting quarterback here for this team, because I think he shows tools of somebody who can be a starter in this league. It's just a matter of, okay, what is he going to be like now with another full off season under his belt, some starting reps from that he got from last year? Did he learn a lot? Did he learn what he needed to as a young starting quarterback last year to really hit the ground running and take that leap to be a better quarterback this upcoming season? So it's a little bit of the same for both guys. It kind of just comes down to who's going to be able to make the biggest plays while also eliminating the negatives and the turnover worthy plays and things like that. And it feels like a giant duh when it comes to the quarterback position. But for me, for Aiden O'Connell, it is simply, did you learn from your rookie mistakes? And are you going to be much better in the second year? Because if he looks much better in the second year, man, that gives you faith for year 3, year 4, all of that. And then for Gardner Minshew, this is sort of a defining season for him. Are you going to be more than a guy who can give you some crazy plays, but will also give you a good amount of negatives as well? Can you be more than you take the good, you take the bad with Gardner Minshew? So for me, for him, it's consistency. And for Aiden O'Connell, it's what you learn from a rookie. How much better and more efficient can you get?
How much different is the conversation surrounding Aiden if Aiden is a second round pick as opposed to a day 3 guy? Because it feels like he would get a lot more kind of latitude, a lot more, oh, he's just a young guy figuring it out if he were kind of drafted a little bit higher. And obviously the plan was not for him to play as much football as he did a year ago, but that's reality. So I'm just curious from like your perspective, like it feels like it'd be a little bit different, that conversation, if this was a dude who was not picked on day 3 of the draft.
No, I agree with you. And I think that he should have been picked higher. I really do. This is a situation where, I think, preconceived draft notions sort of come true in this regard when it's like, hey, if you're a day 3 pick, you just don't have as long of a leash. Like the viewpoint of you is that you are just a day 3 pick. You are expendable. We don't really have to give you that many cracks at being a starting quarterback. Whereas if you were a second round pick, if you were a top 50 pick, it feels like you get a lot more benefit of the doubt. And for O'Connell, I feel like his talent is much closer to that of a second round pick than it was where he was actually drafted. So to me, I'm glad that the Raiders seem to not just say, hey, we brought in a veteran, they're going to be the starter no matter what. You were a day 3 pick. Thanks for helping us out last year. It's fine. It feels like it's a legitimate competition, and it should be. And just, a lot of people talk about, man, the best players are going to play. It's not always the case. Sometimes you get GMs and you get coaches who, hold on to what they thought of these guys pre-draft or their first impressions of these players or where they were drafted, even like we're talking about here. But it doesn't feel like that's the case with the Raiders. And maybe it's because they don't necessarily have the luxury to think like that. But however they got to this point, I'm glad that it really does feel like an open competition and letting the best quarterback win.
Tampa Bay, Trey, before we get you out of here, big picture, right? It could be Raiders, could be not, could be college ball, whatever it is. Give me something that is exciting you about 2024. Because it feels like we have no shortage of storylines, certainly in this building. The AFC West is crazy. So many new faces revamped there. But what are you looking at? What is getting you out of bed in early July to look forward to?
Honestly, if we're just sticking with the NFL in particular, I would say certainly on the AFC side. Yeah, you've got some teams that have been good for a little bit now, but the Chiefs are coming up on, and I know Raiders fans don't like to hear this, but it's true, so I got to say it. They're coming up on the 3-peat, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens after this? I'm really curious because look, Patrick Mahomes isn't going anywhere, but is this dynasty really going to be the same in Kansas City after this season? I think there's a chance that over the next 2-3 seasons, again, not that the Chiefs are going away in any shape or form, but maybe it's not as dominant as they have been over the last couple of seasons. And the door gets opened a little bit more in the AFC for somebody to really entrench themselves. The Bills as well, taking a little bit of a step back. Some of the star players in Cincinnati might be on their way out. So it just feels like in the AFC, it feels like we're entering a time when it might be a changing of the guard a little bit, or at least a changing of the competition where the door is going to be open for a lot of these teams to whatever that next era is, they can slide themselves in there. So whether it's the Raiders, whether it's the Chargers, whether it's the Jaguars, whether it's the Dolphins, the Jets, whatever it is, I feel like some of these teams that haven't been able to get over the hump over the last 3 or 4 years, their time might be coming in 2025 and beyond. So I think this is going to be a really interesting building block season for the AFC and what might be the future of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And what am I excited about? This new college football playoff, baby. Come on down. So much crazy good ball we're going to see, especially, I mean, really, as soon as we get this thing rolling. But, dude, November, December is going to be nuts. The benefit of working in the NFL is I get most Saturdays off, so I can sit in front of the couch and veg out and watch all the college ball. So I'm excited. But, yeah, to your point, like, there's going to be a lot of new in 2025, but I think there's going to be some new in 2024 as well. Okay, Mr. Sikkema, where can the people find you outside of hanging out with us on this little program here? Where do you do all the good, important, real work for our friends at PFF?
At Twitter, or X is what they call it now. At Tampa Bay Trey is where you can find me. PFF.com is where you can find all my written work. And then, man, you talk about college football. Myself, my co-host Connor Rogers on the NFL Stock Exchange show. We are going through summer scouting already. So if anybody out there just kind of wants to know, maybe dip their toe in the water on what the 2025 NFL draft might hold for the Raiders, come over and hang out on our YouTube channel. NFL Stock Exchange is the show. We're already almost through all of the offensive positions. We'll be going through defense next the entire summer. We're just doing summer scouting, getting you prepared for some of the best in college football and the upcoming NFL draft.
Make yourself smarter. Go hang out with my guy Tampa Bay Trey. He will take care of you. It will be great, as it always is. And as is the case, man, it was always great to see you. I say it every time, bro. We're going to get you to Vegas. I'm going to get you into the studio. If it is the last thing that I do, we will zoom out and I will superimpose your face in one of these 3 other chairs. It is my life's calling now, sir. We're going to get you to Vegas, okay?
I will be sure to wear my finest black shirt on the day that happens. So it's absolutely got to happen.
It'll be a great day. All right, brother. Enjoy the holiday. Enjoy what remaining weeks we have of summer before we wake up. We go to camp. We do it all again. Be good, man. I appreciate hanging out with us.
Appreciate it, my friend. You too.